What is going on at wide receiver?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I got a really fun show coming out, all you everydayers out there. I am so excited to talk basketball because it's going to be sold out. It's going to be jam-packed. I cannot wait for Washington versus number 4 Michigan on Wednesday night. So let's talk about if the Huskies can pull off the upset. I also want to just talk general transfer portal because that's the haps right now. That's what's going on. So I'm going to do a little bit of speculating, crunch some numbers, and see how many guys Washington might take. Although one thing we do know, one of those guys is going to have to be a wide receiver. And this is getting a little exhausting because I sat here and I talked about Nick Marsh. I talked about Reed Harris. I talked about several other top-tier wide receivers that Washington should be going after. Quincy Porter, Mylan Grant from Ohio State. Both those guys are at Notre Dame now. Washington still doesn't have a wide receiver. Darrell Gill is a guy I talked about a lot this week. Got a lot of questions from him from our insiders. And it looked like things were in a good spot on Monday night as I record this on Tuesday evening. And then he gets the crystal ball to Ole Miss on Tuesday morning. And there's a lot to unpack here because I've talked a lot about both sides of this. I've seen a lot of you everydayers in the comments saying, well, hey, hold on. They just recruited 4 freshmen. Do you really need to go out and get a wide receiver? And in my opinion, the answer is still absolutely yes, because you are losing a lot of guys in that room, whether it be to the transfer portal, Denzel Boston, the NFL draft, Amari Evans to graduation, whatever it might be. The biggest problem with that is you're also losing, one of those guys being Raiden Vinesbright as a true freshman starter. There's a lot of talent coming out of that room. There's also a lot of talent coming in the case of these true freshmen, whether it be Trez Davis, Mason James, Blaise Levistu, who I'm really excited about, Jordan Clay. You have 4 high-end guys that are coming into this room. And yes, it is very clear with how things played out during the 2025 season that Jedd Fisch and Kevin Cummings are going to want to play them. Of course. However, that does not discount the fact that even when Rome Odunze was on his way out, like you could have gone and done something similar where you bring in a Jeremiah Hunter, who obviously had the experience from Cal that you were looking for. Obviously, Giles Jackson had a whole bunch of snaps under his belt. But we sat here on this show, I wrote about him over on Huskies Wire, that Denzel Boston was going to be that guy. What do you know? 2 years later, Denzel Boston is on his way to the NFL draft where he should be a first-round pick. You don't have that guy right now on the roster. And that's okay. Not every team is going to be able to sit here and always say, hey, we got a first round pick, a wide receiver coming up. Watch out for that guy. And it was great that Washington was in that position, and Washington should be in that position. Like, this is a program that consistently develops top tier NFL talent. When you look at the list of programs with the most just overall players in the NFL, Washington is always on that list. And right now we're sitting here and I could name off several guys who from every class that I think have the potential, the athleticism, the upside, whatever it is that you will, to be an NFL guy one day. I'm not going to do that right now because that's a whole another conversation for a whole nother day. At wide receiver specifically, I do see that in terms of traits from some guys, in terms of just what other guys have brought to the table already, in terms of body types, whatever else. There are a lot of guys in this room who absolutely have that caliber of upside. And I think that is an important thing to note when we have this discussion, because one guy in particular that I want to highlight who does play that X receiver position is Justice Williams. This is a dude who, I've made no secret about it on this show, I am extremely high on what he brings to the table. And he is somebody who, if he breaks out in 2026, he does become a starter. He does take over that Denzel Boston role. You could be sitting here looking at this whole conversation that we're having right now and saying, man, That was really silly of me to panic about that because look at how good Justice Williams is. This is fun. I love this. You can have that exact same conversation about Jordan Clay. Maybe Deji Jose, the redshirt freshman from the 2025 class. Maybe he's the breakout guy. And it's, oh man, I didn't see that coming, but hey, it's great that Justice Williams had 65 catches for 740 yards and 7 touchdowns, whatever you think that number might be. And obviously you're going to be more than happy with that. However, with the goals that this team has going into the 2026 season, you need to find a way to figure this out. So let's get to the bottom of this, because I think the answer to this question is very, very simple as to why Washington, and especially Jedd Fisch and Kevin Cummings, who've produced some high-end wide receivers and several NFL draft picks, and they're about to add another to their resume in their 5 years just coaching together, why they haven't been able to bring in one of these guys, where we saw Nick Marsh go to Indiana. We saw Reed Harris go to Arizona State, where several other high-end wide receivers wound up, including Raiden Vinesbright. I think that a lot of this has to do with the Dezmen Williams situation. And I don't mean that to in any way to like point a finger, because obviously it's a very complex deal with outside influences that involved him and everything. I don't think he's blameless in this, but the fact that a week ago, and this is something where the CBS Sports report that came out naming just some of the suitors and how this whole situation went down, the fact that this was in the rumor mill even before he officially re-signed that contract, and then, everything kind of went to hell in the days following that. It was very much out there that Dezmen Williams was possibly going to be on the market in the transfer portal. And I think this is something that wide receivers around the country have taken notice of. And in its own, for several reasons. Obviously, that is going to be a big problem. Now that Dezmen Williams is back, you would hope that Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff are going to be able to cool that off a little. And maybe we see somebody with a whole bunch of production. Maybe Darrell Gill is still, because as I'm recording this at 5:34 p.m. on Tuesday evening, he is not committed. Again, he does have a crystal ball to Ole Miss from 247 Sports, but things can always change. It looks like Ohio State is trying to get in the mix there too, so we'll see what happens. But as I sit here and dissect this situation as best I can, that is the most obvious solution, in my opinion, in terms of how this all went down, because I'm sure that, maybe Washington reached out and had some conversations with a Reed Harris. And the response from Reed Harris's camp very well could have been, well, hey, doesn't sound like your quarterback is all too interested in sticking around, and we don't want to have him break in with a guy that you're also breaking in with. And that would be a really fair argument on the part of all of these major wide receivers camps around the nation when it comes to, even with how much some of these high-end guys have been able to produce in Jedd Fisch's system. That is something that you cannot get over. And if Washington is still able to sign a wide receiver, which I fully believe that they will, we'll see who that winds up being. But I think that this is something that is going to be a worry going into spring camp, because again, as I sit here, I love the potential of several guys in this room. However, as I have said before, and as I'm going to continue saying, the coaching staff's goal, Jedd Fisch's goal, is to get to the college football playoff. And when you take Dezmen Roebuck out of the equation, freshman All-American, who I think can absolutely be a guy that continues growing and developing and helping this team in 2026, you take his production out of this, and Washington has somewhere in the ballpark of like 40 catches as a team for 500 yards. It is not a lot. And this is just among wide receivers, mind you. That's not a lot. That's not good enough to get done what Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff want to get done. And again, we could be sitting back here in October and it's, wow, Justice Williams looks great. It's too bad that he missed so much time in 2024 and 2025 with injuries. Maybe we would have seen it a little sooner. These are all discussion points that could still be had in the future. But as of right now, this is something that's really concerning, because this is something where, again, as we've seen it through the high school ranks, Washington has killed it when it comes to recruiting wide receivers, getting Jordan Clay, Trez Davis, and Mason James out of Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma. That's not an easy thing to do. And they went out there and they did that. And you need to tip your cap to them for doing that. And it looks like there are several reasons why that might not be going down in the portal. But when you really sit down and dissect the situation, I think that that is the one that makes the most sense. And as we continue to sit here and talk portal, Washington certainly has a couple more spots that need to be filled. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel has given all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boosts on the bet you already feel great about, whether you want to ride with the favorite. When you think a team controls the matchup, you can take a shot on the underdog if you feel an upset coming, or you could build a parlay around the players and moments you think decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. Staying on the topic of wide receiver here for a couple of minutes, as I was recording that first segment, a report came out from 247 Sports that Washington is one of 4 teams that has reached out and displayed interest in Kennesaw State wide receiver Christian Moss. This is a guy that I'm really interested in, good friend of the show, Alex Katzen, who writes with me over at Huskies Wire, pointed him out to me a couple of days ago. So we kind of been texting back and forth on him, doing a little bit of research. At 6'3", 199 pounds. This guy is really, really interesting. He'll have one more year of eligibility remaining after leaving the Virginia Tech program in after the 2022 season, but not entering the transfer portal for a full year, which is where he wound up at Kennesaw State. And he's been able to put together, after this season, where it's 45 catches for 689 yards and 2 touchdowns, he's up to 65 catches for 963 and 4 scores in his career. So again, 6'3", 199 pounds. This is somebody who I'm very, very interested in. And again, Kansas, Stanford, Ohio State being the other teams in the mix. I'm very curious to see how this works out for Washington because, again, Darrell Gill still has not announced his commitment anywhere. It doesn't feel like it's going to be Washington at this point in time with how things have been trending over the last day or two. But this is somebody who, again, fills that mold. And with 1 year of eligibility remaining, if he does come in and shows that he is very clearly the best guy for that position, great. Of course, you're happy with that. Behind him, if Justice Williams can stay healthy and show out in spring and fall camp, or again, I was very impressed with what he was able to put together in spring and fall last season. And at 6'4", 210 pounds, the way he moves, if he can stay healthy for an entire season, I do legitimately believe that he is going to be a big time player for this Husky offense. And with Jordan Clay coming in January too, if that kid can get up to speed quickly, and by the time we get out there for spring practice, he's running with the second team or whatever already, I can't say I'm going to be shocked. And in terms of guys who can go up and get it in a jump ball scenario, I like all of these guys, Christian Moss included, in that kind of scenario. And the more that I just look at what can be next for this Husky team, somebody like Christian Moss should absolutely be included in this, because the question that I'm asking here is, or as all you everydayers on YouTube here can see, is how many more transfers does Washington have room for? And I'm going to list off 3 names for you because I just feel that is, appropriate here. But I also think that somewhere between 3, 4, maybe 5, depending on what happens in these next couple of days, as guys are still able to enter the portal until Friday. You don't have to make a decision by Friday. It's just obviously the sooner the better, with classes already getting underway at a program like Washington, which is on the quarter system, and guys are going to want to make their decisions relatively soon so they can get enrolled, get ready for, winter workouts, everything like that. So as I look at this situation, I think Washington is going to take between 3 and 5 guys. This is just with all the knowledge that we have right now. If 2 or 3 more guys enter the transfer portal at different positions, obviously that might change things, but this is where we're sitting right now. And I think Christian Moss is a guy that I'm absolutely going to be keeping an eye on because he has the talent. He has the body type. He has everything that you're looking for if you're Washington, Jedd Fisch, Kevin Cummings at this point in time. Now, with that being said, let's jump back to everyone's favorite point of discussion on this here podcast, the defensive line, where one guy who entered his name in the transfer portal on Tuesday, right before I pressed record on this, is former Louisville edge rusher CJ May. And this is a name that a lot of you everydayers might be familiar with because during the 2025 class, we had many a discussion about who CJ May is, what he brings to the table as a really big, long, 6'4", 225-pound edge rusher. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of Highland Home High School down in Alabama, and he took an official visit to Washington before settling on Louisville. And he redshirted this past season. He didn't get a chance to play in any games. And that was mainly because of some of the guys that were ahead of him. He was just buried on the depth chart. And this is something where I remember hearing a lot of things coming out of the program around the time that he was visiting, everything like that, that Washington felt really good about where they stood with him. And it did come down to Louisville or UW at that point in time. And obviously he chose the closer to home route and everything like that. And with what Washington needs on the outside, this is a guy who I don't know how much he might be able to come in and give you right away, but I feel like, especially in terms of the optics of what a guy like CJ May can do for your room, I would take him in a heartbeat if I were Jason Kaufusi, Ryan Walters, Jedd Fisch, Aaron Van Horn, whoever, because this is a guy who just raises the ceiling of what you are looking for in the room. He's got, again, the length, the size at 6'4", 225 pounds, and plenty of ability to put on weight with what his frame is right now. And if you can get this guy up to 240, 245, I feel like not only will his strength and just the power that he rushes with improve, but this is just another guy that you can add to an edge rusher's room where you need to take a big swing on talent. And again, it was very clear that Washington wanted to do that with him out of high school. They just lost out to the closer to home route. And I think maybe CJ might think about the relationship he had and maybe still has with some of these guys at Washington to think about coming up for an official visit again, seeing just maybe confirming everything and seeing if it's all exactly the way he remembers it. And with what Ryan Walters is doing, if that is something that he feels comfortable with and wants to be part of, because this Husky coaching staff was, again, sitting in a really good spot for him. And I think that if those avenues are open, they need to be explored. And I look at so many of the guys that Washington has, either been involved with or lost out on, or even some of these guys that they've gotten, the relationships just go such a long way with the staff. And in a portal period where you'll hear coaches talk about this around the country, whether it be football, basketball, whatever, saying, yeah, it's really tough to get an opportunity to vet some of these kids and talk about the, just the goals that we have for him long-term, because within 48, 72 hours, sometimes they'll have an offer that's too good to refuse in terms of monetarily. And programs like Washington, which have been so big on relationships throughout this process, they might lose out. And I feel like we've seen that a couple times already in this portal cycle. We were just talking about that at wide receiver for one reason or another. So I look at what CJ May brings to the table, and I feel like despite not playing at all at Louisville during his true freshman season, that he is someone that Washington would certainly be in their right minds to go out there and take a swing on. So we'll see how that works out. Another guy who this Washington coaching staff and the Washington program as a whole is very, very familiar with is Keona Davis, the defensive lineman from Nebraska. I know I've talked about him before. You might remember him. Keona Wilhite. He's since changed his name. And this is a guy who at Nebraska this past season, 32 tackles, 3.5 for loss, was not just committed to Washington at one point in time, but was also committed to Jedd Fisch and Jason Kaufusi during their time at Arizona. Washington was able to flip him during the 2023 season. He was part of the 2024 class, was a sophomore this past year at Nebraska, and at 6'5" and 275 pounds was certainly productive for Coach Matt Rule. And that is something that Washington is absolutely looking for, not just on the interior, but we talked about this, as you everydayers probably remember, with Enow Etta from Michigan as it relates to somebody who can not just play inside, but play on the edge as well. And I remember talking to Keona Wilhite not too long after he made his commitment to Washington a few years ago and telling me that that was the plan for him, because he's got a great frame at, again, 6'5", 275. He's got really, really long arms. And as someone who, again, you look at those numbers, absolutely has what it takes to be productive in the Big Ten. And just like with CJ May, that's why I emphasized it several times. If you believe that that door is open, you need to find a way to break through it and earn a commitment from a guy like this. Because if you have just somebody on this roster who can give you that flexibility to play inside and outside, it just opens up so much in this defense. And to bring it back to the main point before we move on here of how many guys you can take, you need to find spots for guys like this, where when you have 9 players leaving your defensive line room, it's great that you've been able to retool with 5 through the high school recruiting class, and you've got 4 coming into the transfer portal right now. You just need more, because one position where personally I'm really excited, no matter what his role is, to see what Tiayu Mukais brings to the table as a 4-star true freshman along the interior, you can't rely on that guy to plug up all the holes, no matter how advanced the coaching staff might believe he is, no matter how advanced I believe he is and ready to play as a true freshman. That is a guy that you need to give as much help to as possible, because you look at this rotation right now along the interior, it's Trez Davis, it's the transfers, Darren Conley, Deshaun Watts, and Kai McClendon. That's great, but that's not enough. You were hoping that Javon and Armon Parker could give you something this season. We've talked about Omar Khan being a guy to potentially step up. Obviously, Dominic Macon, like the Parkers, is now in the transfer portal and looking for a new home. On top of that, it's T.I. and two guys that I don't believe are going to play this season in Tom Malu and David Schwarzel. I love what they bring to the table. I love the upside. I think the talent is there, but that talent is not there and ready right now to compete in the Big Ten. And I don't mean that as a slight to them. They are just longer-term developmental guys, and that's okay. Every college program has those dudes on their roster. But if you're Washington right now, you need to go take a swing on a guy like Keona Davis, because you need that production now. Ryan Walters said it in November, that he believes that his defense, and there is a really solid track record of this, of them taking big steps forward from year 1 to year 2. You've got the talent in the secondary. You've got the talent at linebacker. I really like the talent that you've brought in along the defensive line. However, it is not enough, and you need to go out there and get more. And these kinds of guys, while CJ May has not played yet, while Keona Davis certainly, again, has that production and is somebody who I think would fit really, really well in what Ryan Walters is looking for. You need to go out and get those guys now, because, again, if you want to take that step forward and you want to compete for the college football playoff, these are things that Washington absolutely needs to do, because defensive line play, as we saw in 2024 and as we saw at points in 2025, can make or break teams in the Big Ten Conference. And speaking of what's going on in the conference, let's switch gears here, because Washington basketball has their biggest game of the year coming up when number 4 Michigan comes to Seattle on Wednesday night. This is going to be quite a fight. I'm so excited to watch this game on Wednesday night as number 4 Michigan comes to Seattle to take on Washington. And just a quick reminder for any everydayer out there who might be attending this game, fans have been encouraged to wear black for a blackout. Looks like UW is going to be donning their black uniforms as well. I think that this is going to be a really interesting game for several reasons. Starting off with the obvious, this is an incredibly good Michigan basketball team. Danny Sprinkle said during his Tuesday press conference that he believes that this is the best team in the country. And it's obvious they would be walking in here undefeated if it weren't for a loss at Wisconsin the other day, where Wisconsin hit 16 three-pointers, and they still were barely able to eke out a victory. That's how good and that's how deep this Michigan team is. Obviously led by Axel Lendeborg, who is leading the team with 14.7 points per game. And that's only you might think to yourself that, that's not that bad. Michigan has 6 guys that are averaging double digits this season. They're so deep. Their rotation is so good. They're so fluid. They share the ball so well. This is an incredibly impressive basketball team. And I think Washington is a team that can really give them a run for their money if everything is moving and looking the way that it did against Ohio State on Sunday. Now, obviously, there are several key factors that play into that. So let's break them down, because I know I talked about this on yesterday's show, as you everydayers know, but it's all worth repeating because we did get a chance to talk to Danny Sprinkle again on Tuesday before this game. And the first thing that I know a lot of you were asking about, I got a lot of questions about it over in the insider chat as well, is Desmond Claude. And Danny Sprinkle kind of made this situation a little bit more confusing. And I don't say that to fault him, because he is someone who is known as a very tough coach. And so for anybody who might have missed it, if you didn't hear yesterday's show, Desmond Claude has not played since the 11-minute mark of the second half against Purdue. Then, of course, that leads into Ohio State on Sunday, and he wasn't spotted at Saturday's practice that was open to the media. And apparently he missed that practice for what Danny called personal reasons. Then, of course, warms up, goes through everything against Ohio State, doesn't play in that game. And then Danny's asked about him again on Tuesday and asked if he was going to be available. Danny's response was, he'll be on the team, which is its own situation with Christian Nitu, who has obviously, it seems like he's stepped away from the program after being asked to take off his red shirt in the first couple games of the year with Washington's injuries in the front court, has chosen not to do so. I've got a lot of questions about him. So I just wanted to address that really fast because we haven't even seen him on the bench for the entirety of the year. And Danny has not addressed that, and he has refused to several times. It just feels like that is what's going on there. As with Dezmen, it doesn't seem like that is the case. I just wanted to address that because of the comments that were made. And then when asked if he was going to be available, he just said, we'll see. We'll see with everybody because we haven't practiced yet today. He met with us before practice. Practice was closed, so we didn't get a chance to watch what was going on. And obviously that's important for several reasons, where there are a couple of guys who maybe have an opportunity to play in this game. Jacob Ognacevic and Wesley Yates being the big two. With what those guys bring to the floor, of course, you want the dynamic scoring ability of a guy like Wesley Yates and how he changes this backcourt in terms of how they have to be guarded with what he brings from behind the three-point line. We'll see what that looks like. We'll see what it also looks like with Jacob Ognacevic. And I mentioned both these guys in the same light because they were both listed as questionable heading into Sunday's game against Ohio State. And Danny said that he spoke to both of them before the game and said that neither of them felt that they were completely comfortable coming back. And he didn't want to push them because of what it's going to look like over the next couple of months of Big Ten play. And this is a game where whether it be mentally or physically, whatever it might be, as those were the two hurdles that he discussed, if they're ready to come back for this game, that adds so much. Even if a guy like Jacob is only able to play 15 minutes, even if Wesley is only able to play 10 or 15 minutes, those are huge in a game like this. And if you can slow down this Michigan offense on the defensive side, where Washington did a really, really good job on the defensive end, especially in the second half against Ohio State, where they held a very good team to 37.5% from the floor, that is going to be critical in this game. And if you can add in these guys and what they bring on offense, obviously Wesley has been averaging 14.9 points per game, or 14.7, this season. Adding a guy like that to the offensive rotation is critical, and it helps space the floor for a guy like Zoom Diallo, who has been so impressive all year long. For Kimari Peterson, who when he gets hot, this could be a game where I feel like Washington might rely on him to hit 3 or 4 3-pointers, and we'll see what that looks like because he has been a guy on both ends of the floor who has been critical this year. And again, it all comes back to defense, and this is a guy who I feel like we're going to see Washington ask Kimari Peterson to play a lot in this game because of the way that the effort that he shows, I should say, on the defensive end of the floor. And I've been so impressed watching him all season long. And this is going to be a game where, for a guy like that, Southern Conference Player of the Year last year, if he needs to step up on the offensive side too and be that second or third option behind Zoom Diallo and Hannah Steinbach and whoever else it might be that steps up in this game for Washington, I feel that he can do that, and he just changes the entire dynamic of this team. But I want to talk about my X factor real quickly in this game. And like I said, Michigan, one of the best offenses in the country. They're number 2 in the nation in points per game, averaging 94.6 points per game. And with the injury to Jasir Rencher that has kept him out for the last couple of games, somebody who stepped up, hit a key 3 against Ohio State, and played some really valuable minutes is another 4-star freshman from this 2025 class, and that's Cortland Muldrew. This is a guy who I've been really intrigued by since he got here. I remember we were doing media availability over the summer, and there was a day where Zoom Diallo walked by with Cortland Muldrew under his arm and just goes, "Hey, you guys are going to want to talk to this kid pretty soon. He's going to be the next All-American that comes out of Washington." And it was just really fun to just get that kind of insight into just how the players seem to feel about him. And it's very clear that Danny Sprinkle has very high hopes for this guy as well. He is a really fun scorer when he gets going. Obviously, that's been tough to find minutes this year with what this team has been and what this rotation has been. But this is a guy who, more than anything, on the defensive end of the floor, can give Washington a spark. And I say that because obviously there's a chance that Danny doesn't want to trust a true freshman in this spot, well, especially a guy who hasn't played a lot this season. However, with what he brings on the defensive end of the floor, with the energy and the intensity, and Danny likes to call him a wild banshee in terms of every day at practice, he is willing to step up and guard whoever the best player on the floor is on the other side of their scrimmages, their 5-on-5s, whether it be Wesley Yates, Zoom Diallo, Desmond Claude, whoever it is, he is not afraid to take on that challenge. And this is a game where if Danny doesn't feel comfortable with that, and maybe he takes his lumps, obviously, he's probably going to go away from him. But it just does, the way he talks about him, if that doesn't happen and he does play 10, 12, 15 minutes, whatever it is, to just give guys a rest, and that backcourt just goes out there and plays some really tough defense, don't be surprised. And that's something that I'm really intrigued by in this game, because it's going to take everybody, whatever is in that rotation, whether it's 8, 9, 10 guys, depending on the availability of some of the guys that I started this segment off with. That is what's going to decide this game, because when Washington gets going offensively, when the ball is moving really well, when they're limiting turnovers, they can do so many things right. And we saw all of that against Ohio State. Now, obviously, this Michigan team is a very, very, very different test. But in a sold-out Alaska Airlines Arena, with what that place can bring and what Washington basketball can be and what this roster can be, I feel like you can also see a really nice glimpse of that on Wednesday night. And I know basketball has been a sore subject around UW for a long time now, since the last NCAA tournament run that Mike Hopkins and his team made back in 2019. It's been a pretty long dry spell, and it's been really, really frustrating. However, if you are able to show that you are competitive in this game, and if you show that you can win a game like this, I feel like this is going to just re-energize the entire Seattle basketball fan base, because then you got Michigan State on Saturday. Then you have to go to Nebraska, and things could, again, go really south for the Huskies during this 3-game stretch. But if you show signs of life and you're able to win even just one of these next 2 games against one of these Michigan schools, the energy that will envelop this program going into just the real meat of conference play that we're going to see moving forward is going to be really, really exciting, because there is so much talent on this team. And if it continues to click and it continues to come together the way that we saw against Ohio State, I am so excited about what this team could look like over the next couple of months of the year. And I think that you should keep a really close eye on them, and you know where to find all the latest on that, and football, the transfer portal, everything else going around in the world of UW athletics. That is right here on Locked On Huskies. And to make sure that you're up to date with all of that, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.